Hola mi gente, ¿cómo están? Mi nombre es Alba Mar, me pueden decir Alba. El canal se llama Seriela, estamos aquí para hablar de libros, algunos de ellos en español desde Puerto Rico. Hello, my name is Alba Mar, you may call me Alba. Channel name is Seriela, and we're here to talk about books, some of them in Spanish from Puerto Rico. Today, after a pretty substantial absence, I am back for a more somber theme, but which I think is necessary for me, because I am not going back to bookish entertainment without first honoring a lot of losses. This past summer, this past few years in Puerto Rico, as a matter of fact, have been crisis after crisis, losses after losses. I will not address the more personal ones because personal. But lately, the island has been hit by just one loss after another. And I want to honor those people, especially the ones closest to home in the southern coast of Puerto Rico. People who have been models of civic activism and pride. So first off, the latest one, this is without chronological order, but I will end with the one that's most significant to me. First one I want to mention is the most recent one that comes to my mind is Efrén Arroyo, who was for many decades a very respected journalist on Puerto Rican TV. I hadn't seen him for a while because I stopped watching Puerto Rican news coverage as soon as it started to become more entertainment than anything else. But Efrén Arroyo was respected not only by myself, but the rest of the island. And if I can find the picture, I will put it up here. Another person who passed recently is the heart and soul of one of our many, many environmental organizations here in Puerto Rico, and that is Casa Pueblo, which is located in the mountains of Adjuntas. And Casa Pueblo was very active in protecting our forests from mining interests back in the 70s. Tinti Deyá, Díaz, married to Mr. Alexis Masol, and that family has been active in all sorts of environmental activities in Casa Pueblo. And I will, there's so many that I will link their website down below and their Facebook page. Their most recent accomplishments have been extending access to solar power energy all around Adjuntas, to the inhabitants, the citizens of Adjuntas, and it's a very laudable endeavor. And then closer to me, someone who I saw frequently and admired very much, passed away in early March and took many of us by surprise, even though we knew that Reymi, journalist here in the southern part of Puerto Rico, radio announcer, sportscaster, and a voracious reader. Towards the end, he was the president of the book club in my favorite bookstore at Candil, had been hospitalized for a while, for a few months, and was receiving care for an apparent virulent form of cancer. And one day, he just passed in the hospital and took us completely by surprise. He was posting almost every day from his hospital bed on Facebook. Towards the end there, he had been doing lives on Facebook from the bookstore about the books in the bookstore and different themes surrounding books. Reymi was considered the conscience of journalism in the southern part of Puerto Rico, and we sorely, sorely miss him. Now, the last one, and if I cut this short, it's because I can't continue. I don't know if you ever heard the song, I will link it down below, Pilot of the Airwaves, has a phrase that says, I've been listening to your show on the radio and you seem like a friend to me. Yeah, that's been part of my life throughout. I've been a consumer of radio all my life. My mother taught me how to listen to radio, all sorts of programming. And when I retired to Puerto Rico, of course, I started listening to radio again. But this shouting back and forth that they were copying from conservative talk shows in the United States got on, frankly, my nerves. And it was threatening my mental health. And somebody recommended, somebody that I care very much for, the father of one of the babies that I was babysitting for, recommended the independent radio station here in Ponce that has just celebrated its 80th anniversary. Family-owned independent radio station in the southern part of Puerto Rico, Ponce, WPAB, WPAB. And we just lost the news director of WPAB, José Elías Torres. Now, when I started listening to WPAB, was at a time, I retired in 2007, 2008, 2009, there was a teacher's strike. And as a retired public school teacher and someone who had belonged to the unions, teachers union in Puerto Rico, I was firmly in support of the strike, but could not find anything on the radio or in the media that supported teachers. So somebody mentioned WPAB. Turns out that José Elías Torres had been a public school teacher. So I immediately identified with José Elías Torres as a teacher. And as an ex-public school teacher, he did have, first of all, he did not have these three-way panels in which people screamed at each other from each political party. No. He had one-on-one conversations with different analysts from all over the political sphere, and also had workers come. He had environmentalists, which is how, through WPAB and José Elías and his interviews, is how I got involved in all sorts of movements, and especially the environmental movements in the southern part of Puerto Rico. against the gas pipelines in all of its manifestations, against coal ash dumping here in Puerto Rico and in the Dominican Republic. He was a person who believed very much in having his listeners do their assignment. Hagan la asignación. Do your assignment. Don't believe everything you hear. Look it up. And he would link this stuff, and he would tell you where to find the articles and what books to read. And that was another thing that I loved about José Elías. I learned, and through WPAB, not just José Elías, but the other radio hosts. Before BookTube, there was WPAB recommending books to me, such as La Gran Ausente, Rafael Cordero's older sister, who nobody ever talked about, despite the fact that the primary documents are right there, in which she was advocating for her school and for her students repeatedly and being ignored as a Black woman. But the documents are there, and nobody ever talked about her until this book came out, and I heard about it through WPAB and José Elías. This is another one of the books that I heard about on that radio station. Of course, one of my favorite history books, Los Chinos en Puerto Rico, is another one that I heard about on the radio station. Of course, Raymond Dalmau from Harlem a Puerto Rico also. Now, José Elías also would have programs in which he talked to one of the two family owners of the radio station, Don Alfonso Jiménez Porrata and Alfonso Jiménez Luchetti. And when he would talk to Alfonso Jiménez Luchetti, Alfonso Jiménez Luchetti is another avid reader. And that's where I heard about The World That Made New Orleans. As soon as he mentioned it, I got it. Haven't read it yet, but I will, especially now after Ida. And another one that Alfonso and José Elías talked about is the battle for Spain, the Spanish-American War. I started this one, but the infighting between the leftist groups there in the Republic reminded me too much of the infighting in Puerto Rico. One of the analysts that participates with José Elías is Juan López Bauzá, the author of one of my favorite books, El Resplandor de Luz Bella. Another one that I heard about on the radio station is La Vuelta de la Esquina, about the Tidings Project that was pushing for independence, but from Congress by Senator Tidings. This was written by Néstor Dupré Salgado. Another frequent analyst is professor and novelist and writer and photographer, multimedia whiz, Eduardo Lado, and I read his Historia de Yuque, which is a reflection, historical fiction about the coming of the conquistadors, the colonizers, to the island from the point of view of the indigenous people who lived here. One of the first books that José Elías brought my attention to was when he interviewed Reinaldo Marcos Padua about Águila. It's another historical fiction novel about an insurrection right before the invasion of the United States, an insurrection against Spain in Yauco, very close by here, in the southern part of Puerto Rico. And this one I'm really looking forward to getting to, in honor of José Elías, one of the first books that he mentioned. José Elías himself was a writer, and he wrote this book about Filiberto Ojeda Rios. This was his interview of Filiberto Ojeda Rios, who was killed in an FBI raid at night in Hormigueros, Puerto Rico in 2005. Another book that he and Jimenez Luchetti chatted about is Back Channel to Cuba, and given the recent situation, is one of the ones that I want to get to. But the one that really, really has to be mentioned here is his frequent conversations with the author of this book, Rolando Emanuel Jimenez. The other author of this book is Jasmine Colon Colon, who translated and analyzed